So we've got all these different kinds of fruits, and we'll come on to those, but we're not going to be talking technical botany for much more, so don't worry. I'm not going to be talking about hard fruits such nuts and acorns and so on. Talking about fleshy fruits designed to attract animals to eat them, to spread the seeds, and that's what fruits are all about. One of the most important plant families for fruiting plants is the rose family, the Rosaceae. And perhaps one of the best known fruiting trees in the Highlands is Rowan, also known as mountain ash, which is a bit misleading. And it has these lovely white flowers with characteristic 5 white petals of the rose family. Lots of stamens in the center and stigmas. The rowan has a very distinctive smell. Some people like it, some don't. And they turn into these wonderful berries in the autumn. Interestingly, we have a big rowan outside the house here, and it's the first year I can ever remember. It's got no ball. It's usually covered in fruit. So something's happened down here. I think it's to do with the late frost, but I don't know if that's similar elsewhere in the Highlands. But as I mentioned earlier on, the rowan fruit is actually technically called a pome. And you can see here, they look like little apples. Of course, it's quite fleshy. These are, on this picture, unusually late berries. They often get stripped off, as you'll know. But they are best eaten after frosts as human food. They're made to many different things, jellies, marmalade, these sorts of things, quite bitter fruits. Macmillan in his paper said, mountaineers of Scotland make them into a kind of cider, or by distillation extract from them an ardent and potent spirit. So there you go. Very widespread species, of course, right up to high altitudes. And it's very important for birds, thrushes particularly. Local thrushes and big flocks of migrant thrushes, redwings, fieldfares, and other thrushes, of course, feast on the berries. And missel thrushes particularly can guard specific trees. Or they try to until they're overwhelmed by big flocks probably, but they'll actually guard trees through the winter. Pine martens are very fond of rowan berries, and you sometimes come across these droppings here. The curious thing is that they look undigested, a mass of rowan berries. They don't appear to be digested. And Johnny Burke's noticed this in his book on the pine marten. He notes this, but presumes that they must get something from them. Related to rowan, there are other species in the genus Sorbus. The native one in the Highlands is the rock whitebeam, Sorbus rupicola, and quite a rare thing on crags, but that too has similar fruits to the rowan, although I've never actually seen them ripe. Pretty inaccessible very often, such as here, North American. Another member of the rose family, which is important for its fruits, is the hawthorn, or may. Again, it has a smell that divides people, but most often thought as rather unpleasant smell. Very beautiful flowers, and has this mass of red berries known as haws. And they will stay on into the winter if they're not eaten by a lot of birds. And again, these hawthorn trees can be defended by thrushes. And related to it is the blackthorn, or sloe. Fruits of these, the flowers are white stamens, but the fruits are a different colour. These are these almost black fruits, the sloes, with a hard stone in the centre. And they've got this waxy bloom on them, which you can see well here. Now, the colours of berries are to attract birds and animals to them, to feed on them, to advertise that they're edible, so that the fauna can then spread the seeds. And red, yes, we can understand, but black seems a bit odd. But this bloom actually reflects ultraviolet light, and it's been shown with experiments in Finland, I think it was. They did it with blaeberries, and they polished and found that it made the berries less attractive to redwings, I think it was. So it does enhance their visibility. And although blackberries don't look visible much to us, then they are more so to other species. Of course, sloes are well known, particularly for sloe gin, which is a very tasty drink, but can be used in other now, wild plums, so-called plums, are a species up in the Highlands, and they're thought to be a hybrid between blackthorn and cherry plum, I think. But I just showed this just to get some insects in here, feasted on by wasps, and just to make the point that fruits are important for a range of invertebrates as well, which won't actually spread the seed, but they'll perhaps help to expose it. Staying with the rose family, the cherries are guin, or the wild cherry. It's a good native tree, but it's widely planted as well, of course. But it's native particularly on calcareous substrates. There's a lot in Lochaber. We have a lot down at Onich on the Ballachulish limestone there. And it has red cherries, smaller than the ones you buy in the shops, but they're still very similar and quite edible. But more common is the bird cherry, with its lovely plumes of white flowers, and it's much more a plant of wet habitats, riversides, and wet ground generally. And it's confusingly, it's called bird cherry, in its common name. Wild cherry is Prunus avium, which you might expect to be bird cherry. Oh, you've got the kitchen clock chiming there. There you go. keep me on time. So bird cherry has, unlike the guin, it has black fruits. It's also known as the hackberry or hagberry, which is derived from Scandinavian word, I think. Has a very astringent taste, which, again, Macmillan said it's not fit for human food, being nauseous in flavour and probably dangerous if eaten in quantity. They nevertheless communicate a pleasant flavour to spirits. So I think he obviously enjoyed his drinks. But that's the bird cherry, but the birds really do like it. And very important member of the rose family, or a group of species in the genus Rubus, the brambles. Now, brambles are a curious group of plants because they're apomictic, which is that they manage to produce seeds without sexual reproduction. So they produce plants which are clones, essentially, of them. And you get lots of different so-called microspecies. And they spread, of course, by their long, prickly stems, and typical in scrub and rough places generally. And you might know one or two people here. In fact, there's one of our audiences on this picture, Marion at the back there. It's a group of batologists, that's people who study brambles, with Angus Hanna leading this group down at Onich. They are a very interesting group once you get into them, but they're quite tricky, and need a lot of effort really to get to grips with. But this one, for example, has a very smooth stem, whereas this one is covered in these little acicles as well as these sharp prickles. But it's the fruits that we're thinking of tonight, and very well-known brambles. Brambles, like a lot of other black fruits, go through this as they ripen. They go through from green to red to black, and this is supposed to be some kind of signal to show that they're ripening. Now, I've never quite what does that mean for red fruits? I don't quite get that. But anyway, the bramble is one of these aggregate fruits, which has each little sphere is called a druplet, but each one has its own seed, and they're all very, very tasty, of course. And brambles vary greatly in their flavour according to the microspecies. This is just another insect, Scotch Argus on bramble flower. The flowers are really a valuable nectar source, but the fruits also provide sugars for late insects. And closely related to the bramble is the raspberry, Rubus idaeus, named after Mount Ida in Greece. Can't figure out why it's named after there, because apparently they don't occur on Mount Ida, but there you go. It often grows in disturbed places, but it does occur more naturally in woodland gorges and so on. Another Rubus species is the stone bramble. This is a characteristic of mountain ledges in the Highlands, and has these 3 leaflets to each leaf, and has quite soft prickles, and has runners. Typical white flower, 5 petals, but the fruits just have a small number of druplets to each fruit, as you can see here. Always a nice plant to find. And then perhaps the most revered, the cloudberry. This is another Rubus species which grows in the mountains and leaf, but the most distinctive feature are the fruits. They grow on a single stem, and they start off, they go into a red phase, but then they turn into this unusual orange, one of the very few wild fruits we have that is this sort of colour. It has variable number of druplets from 4 to 20, and it's a very tasty fruit. It it's rather erratic in fruiting in Scandinavia, and it's very popular in Scandinavia for jams and jellies and so on. Here you can see some of the leaves growing in its typical montane habitat with crowberry, which we'll come to later. Of course, another group in the rose family are the roses. This one is the Sherard's downy rose, which can be recognized by these glandular hairs you can see all over the floral parts there. Hairs with a little red blob on the end of each one, and have this resinous smell, distinctive resinous smell. It's one of the commoner roses that we have up here. This is the soft downy rose with a much more spherical hip. It's the hip. They are this one. You can see the hairs with the blobs on the end of them very prominently. The other main group, apart from the downy roses, the main group of roses are the dog roses, and we have three different ones up in the Highlands. The common dog rose, this one is the northern dog rose, and we also have the downy dog rose. And the northern dog rose can be distinguished from the common dog rose because of these very upright sepals that it has when it's fruiting, and it lacks the glandular hairs of the downy roses. Another wild rose in the Highlands on the coast mainly is the Burnet rose, a favourite of mine, a lovely species with very prickly stems, but it usually grows quite low down on the coast, low down in the vegetation, and it has these distinctive purple hips, and they go darker than this when they're really ripe. So rose hips, this is one in winter. They can last right through well into the winter, provide an important source of food for birds such as fieldfares. I partly put this in to say that freezing actually seems to improve the flavour of quite a lot of fruits, the rose hips do have these irritant hairs on the seeds. So if you're ever wanting to make something like rosehip syrup or whatever, you need to get the seeds out when you mash them up. But the birds seem to manage to avoid them. It was an important source of vitamin C, of course, and was very important in World War II when a lot of rose hips were collected by volunteers, I believe. Also in the rose family, apples and pears, it would appear that crabapple is not native up in the Highlands or possibly in Scotland at all. Recent research by Marcus Rusham and others suggests that it's actually mostly a hybrid with a domestic apple as well, ones trees that do occur up here. And quite different from the fruits I've been talking about so far is strawberry. This is a wild strawberry, Fragaria vesca. Grows very commonly on forest track sides, in woodlands, on banks and so on well-drained ground, and usually avoids the most acidic ground. With these very peculiar fruits, really, with the inside, but still the same idea. The red flesh attracts birds and mammals to eat it, and they're dispersed by the faunal member. So, okay, well, this is the current family, or the gooseberry family. They're these all occur, the blackcurrant, redcurrant, gooseberry all occur quite widely in woodlands, particularly near settlements, but also quite far away. But they all thought to be there through as having spread from gardens. I think there's some debate about whether any of them are native. I think the latest thinking is that red currants are native, but probably not up here. The one on the top right is a downy currant, which is supposedly native up in Highland, but I'm not too sure about that. But of course, the others are important fruits for human consumption. This is elder, one I'm sure you're familiar with. Surprisingly scarce actually down here in Lochaber. It really likes very nitrogenous substrates, and typically associated with farms and settlements. But it has a flavour, the flowers do, and the berries quite something, very strong, make a very potent wine. You can use them for chutney and so on, and they are quite bitter. They're not sweet like black currants, but much feasted on by birds. And actually, the elder and this one, the Gelder Rose, have been recently moved into the Moscatel family. Most peculiar, unlikely thing, but this is Gelder Rose, which is a good native in Highland. Not very common at all, but find it in base-rich gorges, particularly here and there. A beautiful plant. The flowers but with the outer flowers having big petals like this, and the inner ones much smaller. The outer flowers don't serve any floral purpose. They're there to attract insects to the inner flowers. And it has these rather translucent, glowing fruits, which occur in bunches like this. And there's some debate about whether how good they are to eat. So I wouldn't recommend it. I haven't tried it myself, but I think they're edible with care is one thing I read. One of our most exotic flowers, to excuse the dishwasher noises, our exotic flowers is honeysuckle, which you can see here. Very common throughout woodland in the Highlands. And this has a similar translucent red berry to it, which grows in clusters like this. Again, well, this one I think fairly definitely is not good to eat for humans, but birds certainly like it a lot. And another family completely, the Hypericum, the St. John's wort family. This one is Tutson, which also called all-heel, and Tutsin is French for that. So it has a lot of medicinal uses, and it has this thing called hypericin, which is supposed to be toxic. So it's something to avoid. It looks delicious, but to avoid. The ones on the right are the red stage, and the ones on the left are the ripest, which go black. A species of oceanic woodlands, really, but also in gardens. And quite a rarity in the Highlands, this amazing thing, herb Paris. I've seen it on on Skye, and it's one or two other places. It occurs on Skye, but again, not recommended. Has a poisonous, repulsive taste, apparently. So we're going through a few poisonous ones now. This is bittersweet or woody nightshade, Solanum dulcimara, which I think is native in a few places. It occurs in scrub, fen, and on coastal shingle. I've seen it down at Onich on the shingle there. But it also spreads from gardens a bit. And it has these berries which are reminiscent of potatoes, tomatoes, same family. These, pretty sure these are poisonous. Onto ivy. This has these wonderful black berries, which are much loved by thrushes, robins, and other birds. It's a good plant to have because the fruits ripen late in the winter, so it provides an important food source for birds at that time of year. These are some fruits late in the year. And then going with the ivy on the Christmas theme, holly. Ilex aquifolium, an evergreen, unusual evergreen broadleaf. This is dioecious, so separate male and female trees, and that's which is why only some trees have berries. And it also has this toxin in it called ilicin, another one to avoid for us, but of course birds really like this, and the thrushes will defend holly trees. I put this in just to mention that holly has this feature of where the lower leaves tend to be prickly and the upper leaves not, because the prickles are there to avoid it being, and they can't reach the upper part, so they don't need the prickles there. And another prickly one, this is one of the two conifers that we have that have fruits. Juniper, of course, a lovely species which is not that common up in the north, except in the mountains where you get the prostrate form. So this is, again, it's dioecious, so you get shrubs with berries and others not. And the shrubs are actually modified cones, the berries, yeah. They take 2 years to mature. And as I say, we have the upright form, communis, and the prostrate form in the mountains, Juniperus communis nana. And then you might be surprised to see this, but there is a theory anyway that it is native, at least down in the southwest of Highlands, down near Kilmaloo. There's some trees up in a gorge there, which there's a paper I read which suggested they may be native there. Not sure about that, but this has these red fruits called arils. The red part is actually edible, but the seed is very poisonous, so again, not recommended. Has an alkaloid called taxine. And then going up into the high in the hills, the dwarf cornel, a superb little plant, a member of the dogwood family. These petals are really bracts. Petals are very tiny inside, and these are the developing fruits here. It occurs in bogs and upland heaths, and it develops these red berries. It's also called bunchberry, and Macmillan in his paper said that they are eaten by the Highlanders to improve appetite. and hence I called louche accroche, or plant of gluttony. I haven't tried them myself. Okay, so onto a really important family up in the Highlands, the heather family, Ericaceae. The heathers and the heaths here don't have fleshy fruits, of course, but there are several members of the best known being the blaeberry or bilberry, Vaccinium myrtillus, a really beautiful shrub, especially in the spring when it first produces the leaves. This really translucent green colour and these lovely red flowers. Note the green stems, which distinguish it as Vaccinium myrtillus. It's deciduous, but the green stems enable it to continue photosynthesizing after it's dropped its leaves. And it has these well-known black berries. The blueberry that is so popular now, it's superfruit in all the shops, is an American species related to blaeberry, but I still think the blaeberry has the superior flavour. Still harvested in Eastern Europe, have special combs that they use for collecting them. And it has this bloom on it that I mentioned earlier that increases its visibility. Other names are, as well as bilberry, also called hurtleberry or hurts, and much loved by birds, of course, grouse and members of the grouse family. It's an important food for them. And Macmillan said, the delights of going a-blaebering are not unknown even to such superior mortals as mountaineers. In the autumn, you get this red coloration to the leaves, which increases its attractiveness to birds. To it, closely related, is the bog blueberry, bog blaeberry mountain plant with glaucous leaves, but very similar fruits, slightly larger. And another Vaccinium species is the cowberry, or lingonberry, it's called in Scandinavia particularly. It has these distinctive flowers, but very leathery leaves, which is like blaeberry itself. And here it is with its fruits. The fruits are red rather than blue, and it is quite edible. It's much more bitter than the blaeberry, but it makes a very good jelly for eating with meats, and it's also good for sore throats, apparently. It's an evergreen, as I say, and it's found in pine woods and in the mountains as well. Less common than the cowberry and often confused with it is the bearberry, Arctostaphylos uva ursi. A strange name because Arctostaphylos means bearberry and uva ursi means bearberry as well, so it's got a double name. It's most common in the Eastern Highlands, but it does come across to the west. In fact, we get it right down on the coast, usually in the west of Loch Harbour. Very leathery leaves. And it has a much less common relative, the alpine bearberry, Arctostaphylos alpinus, which is a species of the North Highlands. It runs up the centre of the Highlands from about Glencoe up to the north coast. And it has these red berries that turn much darker in the autumn, but it's unlike the common bearberry, it's deciduous. It's a really beautiful berries and leaves. The leaves go this fantastic red colour in the autumn. You can see on the right there, there's some of the darken. And this is the fantastic colour you get in the autumn, and make it very prominent in the landscape. It goes on dry stony ridges at medium to high altitude. And crowberry, much more familiar one, I'm sure. Crowberry has two different subspecies. One in the lowlands, that's this one here, and this one up in the mountains. This mountain one has smaller leaves, and the flowers are hermaphrodite, whereas you get separate male and female flowers in the lowlands. It's popular with birds, important food for birds in the mountains, important for grouse and ptarmigan. Ptarmigan feed on the berries of this and other species. Even under snow, they burrow under the snow to feed on these berries, so they're a very important food source for it. It is edible, crowberry. This is Krøkebar jelly from Norway, crowberry jelly, I should say. And then lastly, this is the cranberry. It has, there are two species quite closely related of cranberry that we have in the Highlands. It's a trailing plant, occurs on bogs, very often on sphagnum carpets, with these very distinctive flowers with the petals curled back. So this one is the common cranberry, Vaccinium oxycoccus, also called bogwort, bogberry, round fruits on thin stalks. The American cranberry is a different species, Macrocarpon, rather bigger. But this species used to be harvested in large quantities in the past from bogs and taken down to the cities in the Central Belt to be sold. Joseph Hooker, who's on the who's in his Antarctic expedition with the Erebus, said, the berries are an excellent anti-scorbutic and used as such on long voyages. So there we go. This is the small cranberry, Vaccinium microcarpum, which is much scarcer, much more of a northern species. Some dispute about whether it's a true species or a subspecies. It has more pear-shaped fruits, which you can see here, and smaller leaves. This is just this is a photograph area there. The Scandinavians are very fond of their mountain berries. On the left, lingonberry, which is the cowberry. In the middle, well, it says blueberry jam, but it's blaeberry. And on the right is cloudberry jam, which is perhaps the most sought after. So just to finish off, I've talked about that we can eat fruits, eat many of these fruits, but I have to have a disclaimer here. Don't use this talk to go out and eat them. You should use a good field guide. I came across these two little quotes. The first one, if red berries are growing in little clusters, they're probably not good. If they're growing in little singletons, they probably are good. I don't think that's absolutely reliable, but that photograph shows the Gelder Road, and reputedly not good to eat. And then there's a little poem. White and yellow, kill a fellow. Purple and blue, good for you. Red, could be good, could be dead. So just thought I'd leave you with that, just as a warning. So thank you very much.